I want to welcome you one more time to your calling. We are in the fourth and what is the final installment in this collection of sermons we've been calling Till Memphis Looks Like Heaven, which for each of us that have a faith in God, we've been learning and unpacking and discovering together how this is the thing we are called to do. To see his kingdom come here, to see his will be done here, that you and I, we all called to this. And if you missed part one, maybe you should go back and listen or watch that so you get the heart of this in you. That this is our calling, to see his kingdom come here. And with that calling comes responsibility. There are some responsibilities we must take up the mantle of. We must understand the significance placed upon us as people of God who have the calling of God on our lives to work and watch over the place that he's put us. And that's not just for some select group of people, but it's for anyone who knows God. We have the responsibility to our words, to not be people who use our words in such a way that it tears down and it pulls down and it hampers and it hurts, but we use our words to build up because there's life and death in the power of our tongue. But also there's work to do. We can't just be those who talk about what somebody else should do or wait for another person or another generation or another whatever to step in and do what we were unwilling to do. We work in this till Memphis looks like heaven. But today, as we conclude this collection and as we put a bow, if you will, on these thoughts, I think it's very important for us to be informed, maybe for some of you reminded, why we do this, why our words are significant, why the calling put on us we welcome with great honor, why the work that we do is so significant. And it's not that it matters in some insignificant way, but it matters seriously and significantly to the things that God wants to do in and through our community, in and through our neighborhoods, in and through our city, in and through us. See, there's a responsibility to our words and a responsibility to our work. But we also have a responsibility to what I will just simply call for a moment our witness. To let people around us know why we do what we do. See, it would be a tragedy to serve and sacrifice and share and supply, and for us to have no idea why we're doing it. For you to volunteer in services on Sunday or volunteer through outreach, to give of your time, to give of your resource, to give of yourself in some way and have no idea why it matters. Why do we want Memphis to look like heaven? And better yet, how can Memphis look like heaven if some of us get to heaven and we look around and we didn't bring anyone from Memphis with us there? Have you thought about that moment where you stand before God? You do as a person of faith. You do as someone who put your faith on his grace. You do as someone who's received his forgiveness for your sin that you could not earn, that you could not strive for because it was by grace that you were saved. Have you thought about the moment that you stand before God? And maybe you're telling him about all the outreach projects you were a part of. And he's like, but you forgot why. You forgot why. You forgot why. It wasn't just humanitarian work. It wasn't just to better the city. You look around you and maybe no one came with you from the Memphis you were supposed to make look like heaven. Now I know what some of you are thinking. Some of you are thinking, well, it's all God's job to save. And it's all God. Yeah, it's God's job to save, but it's our job to get them to him. If it wasn't, then why were Jesus' final words to go into all the world and preach the gospel? Like, why was this his command? Why did he say, don't say there's 4 more months in the harvest, but lift up your eyes and look on the fields because they're ripe and ready for harvest. It is hard. Why was Jesus so concerned in sending his followers out to spread his message if it was all on him? See, I think for some of us, it is entirely possible to be enamored with the work of God and forget the most important work. To be enamored with food being served, to be enamored with a community being uplifted, to be drunken into a stupor with all the good things that may come out of a house and forget why. Hear me today. If we bless our city and never bring our city to the reason why we bless our city, we failed our city. If we bless in our serving and bless in our generosity and make sure Christmas toys are provided and make sure kids go back to school with strength and we make sure that families are fed and we make sure kids don't go hungry and we do these things and they're so wonderful, it's so beautiful. And if we do them and we do them and we do them and we don't connect our city to why we do them, we have failed our city. You see, we do all that we do because of what Jesus has done for us. And we do all that we do to bring people to Jesus. Today, friend, I want to take a few moments by examining one of the stories Jesus told. And my prayer as we examine this together, as we unpack and pull this apart, is that today maybe the people in your community, the people in your neighborhood, the people in your family, the people in our city who are near to you and far from God, that would no longer be a determination that you're okay with, but something would break on the inside of you and you would recognize today that this is personal. My prayer is that it becomes personal for you today. I want to turn your attention to the book of Luke chapter 15. Luke chapter 15 is a famous chapter in the gospel accounts. It's famous because it entails the story of 4 different lost things. There's a lost sheep. We will spend our time there. Jesus follows that immediately by telling the story of a lost coin. And then Jesus tells the story of 2 lost sons. Some of you only thought one son was lost. No. Go read your Bible again. They was both lost. But in Luke chapter 15, at the beginning of it, and with this coin, with this sheep, I want to draw your attention into this moment for a few seconds today. I want to let your heart begin to be moved. I want to allow your spirit to begin to connect with how personal we must take it when those who are near to us get far from God. Let's read this together. Luke 15, starting in verse 1. We're going to read to verse 7 together. It says, all the tax collectors and sinners were approaching and listening to Jesus. And the Pharisees and scribes were complaining. Why were they complaining? This man welcomes sinners and eats with them. So he told them this parable. What man among you who has 100 sheep and loses one of them does not leave the 99 in the open field and go after the lost one until he finds it? When he has found it, he joyfully puts it on his shoulders, and coming home, he calls his friends and neighbors together, saying to them, rejoice with me, because I have found my lost sheep. I tell you, in the same way, there will be more joy in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous people who don't need repentance. Luke, in this articulation here, makes it very clear of the accusation that was commonly put on Jesus. One of the most common accusations used by religious leaders throughout Jesus' life and ministry, right up until the time of his crucifixion, was this idea that Jesus welcomed sinners. This was the primary issue that the religious leaders had with him. The religious elite of his day, the religious gatekeepers of Jesus' day, had a problem with Jesus, not because of his eloquence, not because of his miracles. They had a problem primarily with the invitation that he made to sinners. Now, please understand this about Jesus before somebody tries to dupe you and twist it. He did not buy their favor. Jesus was not a friend of sinners because somehow he paid them off, because somehow he did all the stuff that they wanted him to do and just turned a blind eye to things. He wasn't a friend of sinners because he joined them in their ethical compromise. No. I mean, Jesus was clearly fun to be around. His first miracle happens at a party, a wedding party. And you don't be inviting people to the wedding party that you know about to pull down that. You know what I'm saying? Like Jesus was fun to be around. Jesus was often invited to people's house. He found himself at different dinner engagements, and people wanted to be around Jesus. They wanted to be around Jesus because Jesus welcomed him, and Jesus was someone you would want to be around. But that does not mean for a second that he lowered his standard to pull them in, which is a lie many people have believed. That somehow you've got to compromise your values in order to care for those who are far from God, in order to love those who might be classified as sinners. It's not true. But Jesus absolutely, wholeheartedly, no questions asked, welcomed them. Sometimes the religious called him a glutton and a drunkard. Sometimes they referred to him as the friend of the worst sort of sinners, but he didn't care because his validation didn't come from them. And so they make this accusation again in Luke 15. And Jesus told this parable to Pharisees. There's this group of Pharisees around who are antagonizing him again. And he tells it to them because they weren't caring for the sheep in Israel. In a sense, in this parable here, Jesus is scolding them for not caring about the people that he was caring for. He's scolding them for being very concerned about rules and regulations and not concerned with the tax collectors and the sinners, that Jesus was not concerned about those who desperately and truthfully needed God. Jesus is telling them, you're to be chasing them. You're to be doing everything in your power to bring them in, not push them away. You're to be noticing who's gone and noticing who's missing and doing all that you can to bring them back. And they were not. And Jesus said, because of this, I must tell you this story. Can I tell you, those of us with a faith in Jesus, you and me here today, you and me, you watching online, you joining us at church online, you listening to this podcast, watching on YouTube, wherever you may be, please hear me. Those of us with a faith in Jesus, we are to be caring for his sheep here in Memphis. We are to be the ones that work and watch over here. We who know God are to be about bringing those who don't know God to him. Why don't we? Why are people who know God so comfortable with living their life with people who don't know God and never bringing them to God, never connecting them to the God that they say has changed their life? Why are we so okay with it? I'll tell you why. Because it's not personal. The reason you are okay with having a relationship with people at work or at school or in your family or in your neighborhood or in the city or that you've known since middle school or whatever it may be, the reason you're okay with having them in your life and never feeling compelled to connect them to the God who has changed your life is because their relationship with God, their faith, their eternity, their plight here and now is not personal to you. And at some point, what Jesus is trying to communicate is that the one who ain't here has to matter so much to you that you'll leave what's comfortable and go bring them home. And here's the truth today in our series as we conclude it. That if we don't, our city can't look like heaven. Our city can't look like heaven if we are not actively involved in connecting people who will not experience heaven to heaven. Our city can't look like heaven if we are not moved with personal passion to connect those who are near to us and far from God to the God who can change their life, to recognize who is lost, who is gone, and bring them back. So today, by looking at this man that Jesus tells us about in these sheep, and there's one sheep who wanders away, I want to help you for a moment make this personal. Make your life personal. Make your faith personal. Make the people in your world personal. So let's make it personal. Would you write a few things down today? How do we make it personal? You have to take full responsibility for them. Come on, write that down in your notes there at Church Online. You can plug them into the website there, or you could write this down. Take full responsibility for them. There is a way that Jesus tells this story that is very unique in his day that doesn't really strike us as Westerners as being all that unique. He tells the story of this lost sheep as talking about the man who was in charge, who had these 100 sheep, the fact that he lost one. Now that doesn't really trigger anything for you or for me, but in Jesus' day, in the Middle Eastern world even today, in fact, in much of Europe, as it's often told, all around the Mediterranean Sea, what you would find is that most people would not tell the story this well because culturally, the speaker would never blame themselves or their lead character. For example, if someone was trying to tell you that they had been unable to get on the bus and it was missed, they would never say that they missed the bus. They would actually say that the bus left them, to put the blame on the bus, not on themselves. Or if they were to drop something, you know how sometimes you behold something, you drop it, right? Well, you would never say that, oh, I dropped this object. I dropped my bag. I dropped my phone. They wouldn't say it that way. They would say, my phone fell out of my hand. My bag, it just fell out of my hand. It wasn't me. It wasn't my hand. It was it. It was the phone. Yet Jesus does not say that about the sheep. Please don't miss this. Jesus doesn't say that the sheep wandered off. He says the man responsible lost one. To make it more personal and bring it to your neighborhood, to bring it to those who Jesus was speaking to, what Jesus is saying is that you lost one of your own. You had 100, and one of them you lost. How do you respond when you lose one of your own? Well, I'll tell you this much. You respond very differently than when it's someone else's fault. When you lose something that's personal to you, you respond with a very different attitude, with a very different energy, with a very different focus than you do when you can blame it on someone else. See, too many people of faith do not take it personally that there are people near to them who are far from God. In fact, we have language that we put on this even today. We say stuff like, well, they're not a church person, or they're doing their own thing right now. Or we'll even say stuff like, well, you know, he's a good guy. And I bet all of that is true. I bet they are a good person, at least in your eyes. I bet they are doing their own thing right there. I bet they aren't really a church individual. But even in that language, please hear me, there's this abdication of responsibility taking place. In that language, there's this passing the buck and saying, well, this ain't on me. This ain't about me. This ain't my fault. I didn't do this. Maybe for some of us, the reason we don't take responsibility for the people in our world that are near to us and far from God, maybe the reason we say they wandered away rather than we lost one is because we don't want the blame. I know more than a few people who won't step into leadership. They won't ever be the point person for a project, for a team, for an endeavor. And quite honestly, they never say this, but this is what's true. They don't want the blame if something goes wrong. Now, if something goes good, baby, they want all the praise. They are perfectly fine and capable of taking the praise. But they are so nervous in their character of taking on blame in any shape, any form, any fashion, that they won't step in to responsibility. They won't step in and say, I'll carry the weight on this. They won't make it personal. Can I tell you, the people in your family, the people in your class, and the people in your neighborhood, and the people at your school, and the people on your campus, and the people in your company, and the people you've known most of your life that are near to you, and they are far from God, please understand, they need you to take their present and their eternity personally. They need you. They need you as someone who does know God, someone who's been put here to work and watch over this place, someone who knows them, to not just give them an excuse as to why they're disconnected from God, not just to allow the normalcy of somebody being disconnected from their Creator to be okay, but to be moved with compassion, to take it personal. We must take it personal that people in our world are near to us and far from God. Please understand, though, this isn't about running up to people with condemnation, but caring enough to run to them, caring enough to drop whatever else may be priority in our life, and being moved with compassion to get close to where they are. The man who lost the sheep didn't berate the sheep. You've already heard the story. He didn't beat the sheep up. He didn't get angry at the sheep. He didn't tell the sheep how dumb they were and how stupid they were for getting lost and wondering. He didn't do that. But he took full responsibility. And friend, you and I must too. We must take full responsibility. It's time to make it personal enough that we take responsibility. It's time to make it personal enough that we're not concerned about our preferences, and we're not concerned about our ease, and we're not concerned about how nice things will be for us if we just continue in this vein. But we must own the fact that we haven't done our part yet. We must look around our world, our influence, and go, who is near to me, but they are lost in their connection to God. And it's time for me to roll up my sleeves and take it personally. How do you take it personally? You take full responsibility for them. The fact that they don't know God, that's on me. The fact that they're disconnected from their Creator, that's on me. The fact that they have never had anybody introduce them to the love and the grace found in our God, that's on me. It's time to take full responsibility. The second thing you do is this, write this down. You search without counting the cost. How does it become personal to you? You search without counting the cost. Now, Jesus does not tell us how long this individual searched. He doesn't say how long the man went searching for this sheep that was lost. But I need you to understand, whether it was a few minutes, a few hours, a few days, a few weeks, this was real work. A Middle Eastern peasant farmer would tell you today that if a sheep was lost, it could take a day or more easily of searching. And this searching was not a hands in your pocket, strolling through the park, knowing like, well, there's a fence around here. I know they didn't get too far, so I'm not really all that worried about where Fido is. No. They're out in the wilderness. This searching often involved climbing up and walking through rugged and rocky and dangerous terrain. This search effort did not come with a 15-minute break every 2 hours and a 45-minute break for lunch. It consumed the heart of the one who had lost the sheep. This was dangerous work. This was tiring work. But this was work that was necessary to rescue that which was lost. You have to search without counting the cost. See, most people, when they begin to make any move, any endeavor, do any work, they calculate all that will be required of them. Everybody wants to know how fast it'll happen, how long it'll take, how much it'll cost. This wasn't a concern for the one looking for the lost sheep. And it shouldn't be a concern of ours when it comes to those who are near to us but are far from God. Time should not be a consideration. Reputation should not be a consideration. The money that it costs should not be a consideration. Because what is that in light of someone God wants back? You know what I've learned? It always costs too much. Unless it's personal. You will find somebody that'll tell you you're spending way too much money on that wedding. Until it's your wedding. Or it's your kid's wedding. And then it don't matter. My son was born with a congenital heart defect. When he was 24 hours old, he turned as blue as a Smurf and was rushed from the nursery in the NICU at the hospital he was born in to the leading children's hospital in the region where we lived. He spent 7 weeks in the cardiac ICU at this hospital as they did multiple open heart surgeries, as he lived on a device called ECMO, as they tried to figure out what was going on with him so that they could potentially repair what was happening with his heart and give him life. We were fortunate to have insurance. And insurance at that time was a little different than insurance looks now. But can I tell you words that never came out of my mouth the entirety of the 7 weeks that he was in the hospital, the entirety of the hospital or of the ambulance ride from hospital to hospital, or the time when surgeons come in and cardiovascular intensivists come in, and this specialist comes in, and this breathing person, and this nurse. Can I tell you what never came out of my mouth? How much does this cost? Because it didn't matter. Yo, we got bills for 2 years after his hospital visit. It didn't matter. I didn't care if like everything I had, I would never have, if I would just work and all the money went away for the rest of my life. If he could live, it's worth it. And every parent would say the same thing. The problem is we view our friends and our family and our coworkers and people we've run with we view their connection with God as optional. Their relationship with their creator as something that's neat for some people, but it's not for everybody. And so I just don't want to be too pushy. And the problem is it ain't personal enough for you to pay whatever price has to be paid. You're too worried about your reputation. You're too worried about how much it costs the church to be able to serve. You're too worried about whether or not you will be inconvenienced if we really went full bore with that. You're too worried about all the wrong things. The man who lost the sheep searched, and he did not count the cost. Why are we so worried about all this other stuff? Write this down. Stop thinking about what it cost you and start thinking about what it cost them. You say, cost them? I thought they were the one that's lost. Exactly. I think in our culture, in the year of our Lord 2024, where everybody wants to be tolerant towards everybody and everything except sometimes the truth, we have forgotten the harsh reality that the scripture paints for us. That eternity is marked for every person. Everyone will spend eternity somewhere. It is appointed unto man once to die, and then the judgment. You don't come back and get a do-over. You don't have people who are left here praying that somehow you will get moved from one spot to a better spot. It doesn't go like that. It is by grace that you are saved through faith. And it's not of yourselves. It's the gift of God. It is not by your works, so that no person can boast about it. But guess what? The only way you receive it is by putting your faith on his grace in this life. The only way you receive heaven as your reward is that in this time that God gives you on this life, in this life, is that you acknowledge your sin and move from being lost to reconnected with the one who had you from the beginning. But some of us act like we got forever. Some of us live like our friends and our family got forever. We don't pray for them. And we never invite them. And we never bring them. And we never tell them what God is doing in our life because we don't want to offend them. I don't want them lost. God doesn't want them lost. And until you and I make it personal for the people in our world, they will spend eternity somewhere. And without a confession of their sin and belief in their heart that God raised Jesus from the dead, they will spend eternity separated from God. They will spend eternity just like they chose to spend this life, separated from God in hell. Now, I know that's not the words that make you feel so good on the inside. And baby, I don't care. Because you need to understand the truth. And you need to understand why Memphis needs to look like heaven. Because if we clean up the streets, but don't introduce people to streets that are paved with gold on the other side. Because if we bring resource and we bring blessing here and people don't understand, they just think we're warm-hearted people. They think we're nice people. They think we're civically minded people. You have missed the reason. The reason is your eternity matters to us. Your eternity matters to me. And I want you to connect with the God who created you, the God who gave his life for you. But some of us are too worried about what it costs us. You've got to search without counting the cost. See, in our city right now, there are hundreds of thousands of people who don't know God. And the truth is, based on the way Jesus presents it in Luke 15, we lost them. They wandered from we lost them. until we see it like this, until we feel it like this, until it becomes personal enough for us to leave convenience and leave comfort and do whatever it takes for the lost to come home. It's not personal enough. How do we make it personal enough? Take full responsibility for them. Search without counting the cost. And thirdly, would you write this down? Rejoice over the burden of bringing. The hardest work for the man who lost the sheep, who then took full responsibility and went out and searched until he found it. Jagged terrain, climbing up the sides of mountains, digging through the thicket to try to see if that's the sheep that he lost. The hardest part is once he found it, he literally, after all he had went through, had to take that sheep and put it on his shoulders and bring it back to where the others were. So if he went up the side of a mountain and that's where he found the sheep, he had to put that sheep over his shoulder on the side of the mountain and go back down the mountain to where the other sheep were. He had to do the hard work of bringing. Even though he was tired, even though he had to work to carry the weight, but he did it because it's personal. Somebody in the chat just right now needs to type, it's personal. Somebody may be sitting in your living room listening to this in your car needs to say, it's personal. It's personal. I pray it becomes personal, because otherwise you won't want to carry the weight. You'll be like everyone else. You know, bringing people to God, bringing people to the opportunity to hear about the love that God has for them, the transformation he can bring into their life takes work. And here is what's true. It is work that most churchgoers reject. It's true. The work of bringing people near to us but are far from God is a work that most churchgoers reject and dismiss. You don't believe me? Okay. A recent study found that 98%, I'll say that again, I'm going to say it slow because I don't want you to think I'm 98% of churchgoers never bring anyone to church with them in a year. A whole freaking year. And 98% of churchgoers who give time, some may give money, some may serve in some capacity, 98% never bring another person with them to church in an entire year. You want to hear what's even wilder? 75% of people who do bring, now that's only 2% of people who bring, 75% of people who do bring church people. You know, if I could rip the lid off the mystery of most church growth, the majority of church growth in these United States of America is what is commonly referred to as transfer growth. It is people who leave one church to go to another church. It is people who don't like the service over there and they start going because they like the service over there. It's people who, for one reason or another, they leave one place and go to another. That is the way the majority of church growth, as it is called, happens. And these stats bear it out. Because based on these stats, 99.5% of church goers do not bring an unchurched person with them to church in an entire year. It's one of the things I'm so proud of and I love so much about our church. Not that we're perfect, because we got work to do here. I'm about to challenge you. But the majority of people that come to our church were not in church when they came to our church. which is astonishing for some people in this Memphis, Tennessee, but it's true. Some of you, that was your story. Some of you come in person, you know, it ain't some church people. No. But 99.5% of churchgoers never bring an unchurched person with them to church in an entire year. Here's what's even crazier. That same study found that 7 out of 10 unchurched people have never been invited to church in their life. 70% of people who have never been to church have never been invited to church. Jesus tells a parable about this, actually. And he's like, it should not be this way. It's a different parable than this one. Maybe I should preach it sometime soon. But 70% of unchurched people have never been invited to church in their life. Why? Because we put the label on them, they're not a church person. They're good, but that's not really their thing. Here's what's crazy. 82% of unchurched people, same study, 82% of unchurched people are somewhat likely to attend if they were invited. Almost everyone that goes to church brings no one with them to church who needs church in an entire year. Yet the majority of people who don't go to church have not only never been invited to church, but most of them would actually go to church if somebody would invite them. Can I make it personal for you? You say, please don't. Let's make it personal. When was the last time you brought someone with you to church? And not just someone because it's like, oh, well, they're looking for a new church. Listen, I know people move, different states, different cities, different neighborhoods, different parts of town. Like, I get it. But when's the last time you brought somebody who needed God to church with you? When's the last time you brought somebody to church with you that you had prayed for days, for weeks, for months, that they would come, and then they finally said yes? When's the last time you brought somebody with you to church who you had been inviting for weeks or months or years, and they finally said yes? Here's my challenge to us. This month, let's change that. I don't want to be a part of a normal church. We are not a normal church, and we ain't about to start being that. I don't want to be a part of the status quo. I don't want to fit into somebody's statistic. And there's so much that we do to make Memphis look like heaven that falls outside of the norm. Nobody feeds like we feed. Nobody serves like we, not that I know. People stop me in our tracks when they hear about the work that we're doing. Let's do this work. Because the reason why we serve and the reason why we build and the reason why we buy homes and the reason why we doing all this that we do is because of what Jesus has done for us and to help introduce people to Jesus. Let's take full responsibility this month and search without counting the cost. Let's accept the burden of bringing. And this month, let's bring somebody to church with us that needs God. See, some of you might know this, but at the very end of this month is Easter Sunday. And we are getting ready to celebrate that with what we're calling Easter week. From Palm Sunday through Easter Sunday, there will be many opportunities to worship, many opportunities to connect, many opportunities to pray, to have fun. And the pinnacle of them all is Easter Sunday. And you know what I want you to do right now? Is to begin asking God, who is near to me that is far from you that I have lost? That you want me to take full responsibility for the fact that they're lost. And you want me to not worry about what it costs me to get them to you, but to rejoice over the fact that I get to bring them to you. Let's do that this month. Let's do that this Easter. And let's see heaven celebrate. Because the hard work of bringing is the hard work of heaven. The hard work of heaven is not cleaning up trash on a dirty lot. The hard work of heaven is not rebuilding a home. The hard work of heaven is not passing out groceries. The hard work of heaven is not blessing a city and building up a neighborhood. The hard work of heaven is seeing those who are lost found. See, I'm not talking about you taking a bunch of invites and spraying them. That's fine, do that. I'm talking about having real people in your life that you know, that you love, that you pray for, and personally extending an invitation to them. Personally saying, I want to bring you with me. I want you to be my guest in church this Easter. I want you to sit with me. And literally them sitting, not that you sprayed an invite and somebody wandered in and you had never met them in life. That's great. It has its purpose and its point, and it's wonderful, and it's a great layer on top of it. I'm good with that. But I'm talking about it getting so personal to you where there is a seat saved next to you because I got a friend who needs to sit here. I've been praying for them all month and they're coming today. I've been praying for them for years and they're going to sit with me this Easter. It's time it gets personal. So let's rejoice over the burden of bringing. Let's get it personal. And then number 4, and I close. Let's celebrate the restoration in community. That's what the man who lost the sheep did at the end, right? He brought the sheep back. And as he's coming back, he tells his friends, and he says, hey, I want you to celebrate with me because the sheep I lost is back. Can I ask the church folk a question real quick? You ever heard of somebody leaving a church because that church didn't care for the community it was in? I haven't either. Or somebody leaving a church because they never saw anybody get saved? I hadn't either. Nobody ever got baptized? Yeah, I hadn't heard that either. Of course not. People leave church because they don't like the music. People leave church because the preacher preaches too loud or too long or too quiet or too short. People leave church because the church is too big now or too small now or because it changed. That's because too often in church we celebrate the wrong things. Folk love to celebrate worship styles and songs. They love to celebrate building renovations. Can I tell you what we celebrate? What we need to be about celebrating more and will be about. Let's celebrate those who are lost being brought home. Come on, let's celebrate with all of heaven when someone who's lost is found. Let's celebrate salvations. Let's celebrate baptisms. Let's celebrate folk who show up on Sunday, but they smell like they was in the club all night on Saturday night. Let's celebrate that. Let's celebrate when we walk out the bathroom in person and it smells like somebody just took a hit of something in here. Let's celebrate that, because where else in this city should they be than in the house of God? Let's celebrate addicts being freed. Let's celebrate desperate people finding hope. Let's celebrate hungry people being fed, lonely people being loved. Let's celebrate the testimony of people who can say, I was lost, but now I'm found. Because that's a testimony worth celebrating. Because what Luke 15 tells us Jesus said is there's a bigger party in heaven over the lost being found than the found being found. And for way too long, people under the name of church have only been consumed with those who were already found being fine. If that was the case, Jesus would have said, a man lost a sheep, but he had 99, so he said, I ain't gonna really worry about my loss. Another one will wander over here and we'll have 100. That's the philosophy in many places of worship. But that is not the heart of our God. That is the philosophy of the Pharisees in that day. It's not the heart of our God. The heart of our God said, I want you to be about bringing my kingdom to the place I've put you. And you know what we do in my kingdom? When you lose one, you go find them. And you search, and you pray, and you invest, and you give, and you work. Because when you bring that lost one home, all of heaven celebrates. And there is a party in heaven because the lost was found. And so my prayer today, I pray it's your prayer, is that God would make us people who celebrate. Not the stuff that folk want to celebrate easily, but the stuff heaven celebrates. Make us a messy church that serves and gives and brings and cares and prays and loves till Memphis looks like heaven. Father, today I pray one simple thing for every person listening right now, every person watching right now. Father, I pray you make your mission personal to us. That the reason that we give and the reason that we serve and the reason that we share and the reason that we are bringing and the reason that we are inviting and the reason that we care and the reason that we go after people who are lost is because it's personal. And God, I pray that our hearts would break and that passion for your work would consume us because it's personal. Because it's personal, we're going to work. We're going to hustle, and we're going to build, and we're going to give, and we're going to serve. Until Memphis looks like heaven. And so, God, I pray you would give us favor. Even this month, as people step out of their comfort zones and begin to invite like they never have before. Fill your house for your honor and your glory. Not just with people looking for a neat Easter experience, but people who are desperate for you. People who may walk in thinking they've got everything under control, but they recognize they need you. They need you. And I pray you would use us to bring them back to you. We pray all this, Jesus, in your name. Amen.